There's a way to make any water safe to drink using a powder you can buy for under $1. No filter cartridge, no UV light, no electricity. Just copper powder sitting in the water, doing quietly what copper has always done. The reaction is invisible. It costs $1 and it never stops working. The bottled water industry is worth $270 billion a year. That figure comes from Grand View Research's 2022 global market analysis, built on plastic bottles filled with water that is, in many cases, less regulated than what comes out of your tap. The United States Environmental Protection Agency requires municipal tap water to be tested hundreds of times per month. Bottled water, classified as a food product, can be tested far less. A handful of copper powder in a cloth bag costs under $1, treats water indefinitely, and cannot be put on a truck and sold to you with a label. That's not a mystery, that's math. And here's the thing, nobody mentions yet. There is one specific mistake almost every person makes the very first time they build this filter. It is invisible when you make it. It ruins the first batch. You will know exactly what it is before this video is over. The global water treatment and purification industry, covering filters, UV systems, reverse osmosis, treatment chemicals, and bottled water combined, generated over $45 billion in 2023, according to Allied Market Research. Every dollar of that market depends on you replacing something. A cartridge, a bottle, a membrane, a subscription box of filters shipped to your door every 3 months. A method that uses copper powder, costs $1 and works until you physically lose it, cannot be packaged and sold to you on a recurring basis. It cannot expire on a date stamped onto the side. It cannot run out. So it was never made into a product. It became the competition instead. That silence is not an accident. That silence is a business model. Now step back about 3,600 years. Ancient Egypt. A physician, possibly many physicians, working over many generations, wrote down observations on a document we now call the Edwin Smith Papyrus. It is one of the oldest medical texts ever recovered. It describes using copper to clean infected wounds. It describes storing drinking water in copper vessels. The document sits today in the New York Academy of Medicine. You can look it up by name. This was not magic. This was observation. These were people noticing that patients who drank from copper vessels got sick less often than patients who drank from clay. They did not know why. They knew that it worked. Go further east. Ancient India, a practice called Tamra Jal, which means simply copper water, appears in Ayurvedic texts, estimated at over 3,000 years old. The method has never changed. Fill a copper vessel with water at night. Drink from it in the morning. Indian families practiced this across hundreds of generations, without a laboratory, without a microscope, without a published study. They understood what generations of direct observation had shown them. The water kept them well. Ancient Rome built aqueducts and ran water through copper and bronze pipes across an empire that stretched from Scotland to the edge of modern Iran. Roman legions drank from copper vessels in the field. When the empire collapsed and those copper systems were abandoned, the historical and epidemiological record shows that waterborne illness increased across the affected regions. That connection is discussed in a 2010 review published in Clinical Microbiology Reviews, one of the most cited microbiology journals in the world. You have seen this your whole life. You just never connected the dots. If you have ever dropped a copper penny into a backyard pond and watched the algae slow down, that is this. If you have ever bought a copper water bottle and noticed over weeks that the water tasted cleaner, that is this. If you have heard that hospitals in the United States and United Kingdom are replacing stainless steel door handles and bed rails with copper ones to reduce hospital-acquired infections. That program is documented in a 2015 study in the journal Infection Control and Hospital Epidemiology. That is this, working at a national scale, being paid for by major health systems because the evidence left them no other logical choice. Here is what copper actually does. Most things that kill bacteria use chemistry. Bleach, for example, attacks the outside of a bacterial cell, say, not like throwing acid on the shell of a hard-boiled egg. The shell breaks and the inside is destroyed. Copper works differently. Think of a bacterial cell as a tiny balloon made of 2 layers of very thin skin. When copper touches water, it releases particles, so small that thousands of them sitting side by side would not cover a single strand of your hair, that pass through both layers of that balloon skin. Once inside, those particles break the machinery the cell uses to breathe. Not one part of the machinery, the whole factory. The cell cannot repair this. It cannot adapt to it. It cannot evolve resistance to it the way bacteria evolve resistance to antibiotics. The antibiotics target a specific lock. Copper does not pick the lock. It melts the door, the walls, and the floor. That is why this has worked for 3,600 years and will still work in 3,600 more. A 2012 study published in the Journal of Health, Population, and Nutrition put this to a controlled test. Researchers filled copper vessels with water contaminated with thousands of E. coli bacteria per small drop, far more bacteria than any natural water source would typically carry. They let the water sit at room temperature for 16 hours, roughly the length of a full night's sleep, plus a few hours of mourning. At the end of those 16 hours, the bacteria count had dropped to undetectable levels. Not fewer bacteria, none detected. That result held across multiple tests. The research was not conducted in a high-end lab working to prove a product. It was conducted specifically to test whether traditional practice used by rural Indian communities had a scientific basis. It did. The mistake lives in the first step, not the assembly, not the waiting. The very first step. Keep that in mind. Here's what you need. I want to be honest with you about every number. First, copper powder. Pure copper powder, not copper-coated steel, not a copper alloy blend. Pure copper. You can find it at metalworking supply stores, at some hardware stores, and from dozens of suppliers online. A bag about the size of a tennis ball contains enough powder to build 2 of these filters and costs under $1 at most industrial suppliers, sometimes as little as 60 cents. Second, a fine mesh cloth bag, the kind used for straining nut milk, brewing loose leaf tea, or making cold brew coffee. The holes must be fine enough that dry powder does not pour through, but water flows through freely. You almost certainly own one. If not, it costs about $2 at any grocery or kitchen supply store. Third, a container, a wide-mouth glass jar, a ceramic pot, a gravity-fed countertop dispenser, anything that holds water and allows it to sit undisturbed for several hours. That is genuinely it. Under $3 total for most people. Under $1 if you already own the bag and the jar. Now here is the mistake. You open the bag of copper powder, you pour it into the cloth bag, you lower the bag into your water. That feels right. That feels like the whole process. It is not. Before the copper powder touches any water you intend to drink, you rinse it. You put the dry powder into the cloth bag first, then you hold the bag under cold, running tap water, or pour clean water over it into a bucket you will not drink from, and let it run for about 30 seconds. That is roughly the time it takes to count slowly to 30, or to sing one short verse of any song you know. You swirl the bag gently while it rinses, then you let it drain completely. What you are removing is surface oxidation. Think of oxidation like the thin, powdery film that builds up on old coins, that grayish, chalky layer on the outside. Copper powder, especially powder that has been sitting in a bag or on a shelf, carries that film on its surface. It is not dangerous, but it releases into the first batch of water as very fine particles, and those particles give the water a sharp, metallic taste. Almost every person who tries copper filtration for the first time skips the rinse, tastes that metallic note in the first glass, and concludes copper does not work. The copper is working perfectly. The taste is the surface film, not the copper itself. Rinse it away. The taste disappears entirely. That is the whole mistake. That is the thing that determines whether you use the system for years or abandon it after one glass. After the rinse, your copper powder is ready. Place the cloth bag into your container. Do not press it against the side. Do not let it rest flat on the bottom where only one face of the powder is exposed. Let it hang freely or float in the center of the water, the way a tea bag brews best when it is not pinned against the glass. You want the water moving freely around all sides of the bag at once. Fill the container with your source water. This system works on tap water, well water, collected rainwater, and river water or stream water. For any water that is visibly cloudy, murky, silty, brownish, let it settle in a separate container for an hour first, or pour it through a simple cloth to catch the large particles. Copper powder handles the invisible biological threats. It is not a physical strainer for mud and silt. That is a different step, and a simple one. Once the water is reasonably clear, the copper does the rest. Leave the bag in the water for at least 6 hours. Overnight is better. The 16-hour contact time tested in the published research is the gold standard, the duration that produced the 0 detected bacteria result. Think of it the way you think of marinating meat. 2 hours produces some effect. 16 hours is where the result becomes complete. Set it up before you go to bed. By the time you wake up, make coffee, and sit down, the water has had more than enough time. In the morning, lift the bag out gently. Let it drain onto a small plate. The water in the container is now treated. Here is how you know the filter is working correctly over time. After a few days of use, the copper powder inside the bag will begin to change color. It starts as the bright orange-red of a freshly minted penny. It will darken to a deeper brown. Eventually, the surface develops patches that look nearly black. That is not damage. The rust turns into something like a hard black shell baked into the surface of the metal itself. That is called magnetite. And that shell is a signal that the copper is actively reacting with the water. The color change is the proof. A copper filter that has turned dark brown is a copper filter that has been working. The bag needs a rinse once a week. The same 30-second process as the first rinse. Cold water, gentle swirl, full drain. That clears away any buildup on the powder surface and keeps fresh copper exposed and active. A bag of powder rinsed once a week will treat water reliably for several months before the powder needs to be replaced. At under $1 a bag, replacing it costs less than a single bottle of water from a vending machine. There is one simple check you can do between rinses to confirm the filter is behaving correctly. Fill a small clear glass from your treated water and hold it up to a window or a lamp. The water should be completely clear, not tinted orange, not hazy or cloudy, clear. If it is clear, the powder is not shedding visible particles. The filter is working as the research describes. If you see any color in the water, which should not happen after that first rinse, simply repeat the rinse process and let the water sit again before drinking. That will resolve it every time. Now think bigger. 1 bag of copper powder in a small cloth bag inside a quart-sized jar handles the drinking water for 1 person per day with water to spare. That is your personal emergency supply. Clean drinking water for 1 person at almost no cost and no infrastructure. Scale it up. A family of 4, 2 bags, 2 cloth bags hanging inside a large ceramic countertop dispenser, the kind that holds roughly a gallon and sits on a kitchen counter. You fill it before bed every night. By the time the household wakes up, a full gallon of treated water is ready. 4 people, 1 fill per night, every night. Total cost to build the whole system, under $5. Total cost per month to run it, nearly nothing. Scale further. Some rural communities in India, and this is not folklore, this is documented field research reviewed and cited by the World Health Organization in their technical assessments of household water treatment, have relied on copper vessels as their primary water treatment method for generations, and showed meaningfully lower rates of waterborne illness than neighboring communities using no treatment at all. The World Health Organization has listed copper vessels as a viable low-cost water treatment method for populations without access to centralized water infrastructure. The WHO does not say things like that without substantial evidence behind them. That endorsement is in their public documentation, and you can read it yourself. No bills, no infrastructure, no asking anyone's permission. There is one more thing about this that took a long time to surface, and it changes how you think about the entire problem. Copper does not just treat the water in your container. Any surface the treated water touches, the inside of your glass, the inside of your jar, the cloth of the bag, retains trace amounts of copper ions for a period afterward. The environment around the water becomes slightly less hospitable to bacteria over time. You are not just treating each batch of water, you are slowly conditioning your whole storage system. The longer you use it, the more thoroughly the system works. That is not a claim being marketed to you. It is a physical consequence of the oligodynamic effect that no one sells because no one can package it. Here is what copper powder does not do, and I will not pretend otherwise. It does not remove chemical contamination. If your water source contains pesticide runoff, industrial solvents, pharmaceutical residue, or dissolved heavy metals like lead or arsenic from old pipes, copper powder will not touch those. The oligodynamic effect targets living things, bacteria, algae, some viruses. It does not react with dissolved synthetic chemicals. If you have any reason to suspect your water source has been chemically contaminated, you need to know what is in the water before you decide what to use on it. A local water testing kit, available at most hardware stores for under $20, will tell you what you're dealing with. For biological contamination from a natural source like a well or a stream, copper powder is a powerful and well-evidenced layer of protection. For chemical contamination, it needs to be paired with other methods. No single tool solves every problem. This one solves a very specific and very common problem, and it solves it completely. Also, this is not a fast process. The 6 to 16-hour window is real and cannot be shortened. This is not the tool you reach for when you need safe water in the next 10 minutes. This is a practice you build into your routine in advance. You set it up before you go to sleep. You drink it in the morning. The habit is the whole system. Build it before you need it, and it will be there when you do. An Egyptian physician working 3,600 years ago had no microscope, had no laboratory, had no framework for understanding bacteria, no concept of ions, no scientific method in any form we would recognize. He had a table, a patient, a copper cup, and a lot of careful watching. He noticed things. He wrote them down. He wrote them on a document that survived the collapse of his own civilization, a Greek invasion, a Roman invasion, an Islamic conquest, an Ottoman Empire, Napoleon's expedition, the birth of modern archaeology, 2 world wars, and the entire 20th century. It came to rest in a building in New York City. It is still there, still readable, still correct. The physics has not changed. The bacteria have not changed. The copper has not changed. What changed was who stood to gain for making sure you never connected those dots. $1 of copper powder, a cloth bag, a jar of clean water sitting on your counter before sunrise. A practice old enough to have no inventor, only users, for thousands of years in every civilization that ever had access to the metal. Physics doesn't lie.